Welcome back to the State of series, where we look at not only the performance of certain jobs in FF14, but also, and arguably more importantly, we look at the popularity of them. Today we're looking at my personal favorite healer, Sage, being the second quote-unquote shield healer and the newest healer as of Endwalker. One could expect that Sage would be a pretty popular pick. Combine that with some pretty neat gimmicks like Cardio, which heals the target based off of damage dealt, similar to Discipline Priest from World of Warcraft. I'm not sure if anybody here gets that reference. But on top of that, it also has some pretty fast-paced gameplay through Eucrasia. You use Eucrasia to swap between your heals and your shields, but you also use it to put down your dot as well. All of this is not to mention the fact that your shields also contribute towards your stacks of Toxicon, which is another DPS ability. It creates a very reactionary, fast-paced, and rewarding gameplay loop that I absolutely adore. Oh yeah, and lasers are sick as So, how did the raiding community receive Sage? Let's find out, once again, using FF logs. I say this every time, but please watch my State of the Paladin video if you'd like to see my justification for using FF logs. But let's get right into the logs. I already did this joke. Starting with the overall stats from Anabaseios, it really shouldn't surprise anyone that Sage is number 1. It's brand new. We saw the same thing happen with Reaper. What I'm more interested in is 6.1, where Sage is in second place, right behind White Mage. If you remember from the State of White Mage video, it's a very, very popular job. And while White Mage did suffer for that first patch, with 6.1, a lot of those issues were addressed. And for Sage in 6.1, it did get some minor adjustments, but nothing worth noting. For DSR, Sage is actually dead last, which I do find interesting. White Mage makes sense, the damage output's very useful, but why is Scholar ahead? Once again, I'll do my best to infer. Ultimates are still new to me, so please let me know in the comments if there's a different explanation or if you just disagree. But if I really had to guess, Scholar is doing slightly more healing, but also has access to the ability Expedient at level 90. In general, FF14 fights are very movement heavy, and what I've seen from DSR suggests that the increased movement speed from Expedient might be enough to make Scholar a compelling choice over Sage for certain teams' choice of shield healer. Again, pure speculation, but I felt smart saying it. And for 6.2, it's mostly the same story as in 6.1, with Sage being in third. Moving on to the most contentious raid tier, this expansion, Abyssos. And while yes, White Mage is still number 1, Sage and Scholar are neck and neck. There were no major changes with 6.2, just anonymity changes, because, you know, why not make tanking easier? Sage does pull ahead on damage, but not by a lot. Putting the speculation hat back on, I feel it's just due to personal preference. I did pretty much all of the Abyssos. My stack fell apart right before we got to Hephaestus, but going fight by fight, they're still pretty neck and neck. But Sage pulls ahead for every fight except the last one, the one I didn't do. But even then, they're so close, and I really can't think of any niche abilities like Expedient that make one better than the other, at least for the fights that I remember. Maybe it's Sage's access to more off GCD heals, maybe it's the damage. There is no clear answer with Abyssos for 6.2 or 0.3. If I really have to guess, like I said, it's just a matter of personal preference. But you know what's not a matter of personal preference? Hitting the like button and subscribing. Okay, that is a personal preference, but please? I put a lot of work into this channel, and liking the video lets me know that I'm on the right track. Also, thank you to our members Axiaris and Beatrich. Your support means the world. You can become a member for just $1 a month, but you really don't have to if you don't want to. Now back to it with Omega Protocol, another very controversial raid tier in Endwalker's lifespan. It's weird, in 6.3 it's a very similar story to DSR, where Scholar is the clear favorite, but currently in 6.4, which is still being logged, it's the opposite. Like the rest of the episodes of this series, I just don't have a lot to say on TOP. The only thing that really changed going into 6.4 was the item level increase, but even then, it still sinks to 635, which is like a 5 item level difference. It could also be the fight's longer downtime compared to any other fight in the game. There's nothing major in the patch notes for either 6.3 or 6.4. As usual, TOP stump me. Leave your theories in the comments. Until then, I can only assume it's down to personal preference. But we've finally arrived at Anabaseios 6.4, the last piece of content to look at. And Sage is in a solid second place, once again behind White Mage, which we've established as the most popular healer, similar to Warrior with tanking. But Sage does manage to pull ahead of Scholar with a pretty sizable lead, though will probably stick until 6.5. Looking at each individual fight, the only one where Scholar pulls ahead is the very last one, similar to Abyssos. I'm still clawing my way through the raid tier, but nonetheless, I once again think it comes down to personal preference. Anabaseios has been really good for balancing. I feel like as I've done this series, I can come to that conclusion. With only minor niche abilities to separate them, it really all comes down to playstyle when picking a healer. More specifically to this video, a shield healer. And while yes, Scholar does seem to pull ahead a few times, the data does suggest that most raiders prefer Sage's more fast-paced playstyle over Scholar's more slow and proactive style. Just like me. Ultimately, Sage is a great addition to the roster, and an expansion where one of the #1 complaints, even from me, is the lack of uniqueness or over-homogenization of jobs. It's nice that Sage manages to somewhat stand out amongst its peers, at least to me. Combine that with some sick animations, and I believe that Sage is amazing. Thank you for watching, and subscribe.